Imagine waking up in a country where you have no voice in the laws that govern you, no say in who leads your nation, and no way to influence your future simply because you're a woman. That was the reality for millions of women in the United States for much of the country's history. But through courage, persistence, and decades of activism, women fought back and they won the right to vote. Today, we're taking you on a journey through one of the most powerful movements in American history, the fight for women's suffrage. The beginning of the movement. The women's suffrage movement didn't begin overnight. It was deeply connected to other struggles, especially the fight to end slavery. In 1848, the first major event happened, the Seneca Falls Convention in New York. This was the first organized women's rights convention in American history. It was led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, who were inspired after being excluded from an anti-slavery convention in London just because they were women. At Seneca Falls, they issued the Declaration of Sentiments, which boldly declared, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." That statement shocked the nation, and it lit a fire that would burn for over 70 years. The first leaders. After Seneca Falls, the women's rights movement began to grow. It was led by brave and determined women who refused to accept second-class citizenship. Susan B. Anthony was a fearless speaker who traveled the country, demanding the right to vote. In 1872, she was arrested for illegally voting, and she used her trial to draw attention to the injustice. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote many of the speeches and arguments for the movement. She believed women deserved full equality, not just the right to vote. Sojourner Truth, a formerly enslaved woman, delivered her famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" in 1851, calling out both racism and sexism in American society. Ida B. Wells was a journalist who exposed lynching in the South and fought for black women to have a voice in the suffrage movement. She faced racism from within the movement itself and refused to be pushed aside. These women were trailblazers. They risked arrest, public ridicule, and even violence for daring to speak out. A new strategy. With unity came a new strategy. NASA, led by Carrie Chapman Catt, worked more systematically, building support in each state and carefully lobbying lawmakers. They made progress in the western states first. By the early 1900s, states like Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and Washington gave women full voting rights. But even as they made progress locally, women still couldn't vote in federal elections. That's when a younger generation stepped in and changed everything. The militants step in. Enter Alice Paul, a bold and determined activist who believed the movement needed a more aggressive approach. She formed the National Woman's Party and organized huge demonstrations like the 1913 parade in Washington, D.C., the day before President Wilson's inauguration. Thousands of women marched through the streets, demanding the vote, and they were attacked by mobs while police did nothing. In 1917, they became the first group ever to picket the White House. They held signs demanding democracy for women. Many were arrested and sent to jail. In prison, they went on hunger strikes and were brutally force-fed through tubes. The public was horrified by how they were treated, and support for women's voting rights grew quickly. The 19th Amendment. All that pressure worked. In 1919, after decades of activism, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, which said, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex." But it still had to be approved by 36 states. It all came down to Tennessee. In a dramatic final vote, a young lawmaker named Harry Byrne changed his vote to yes after receiving a letter from his mother who told him to be a good boy and support women's rights. On the 18th of August, 1920, the amendment was ratified. After more than 70 years of struggle, American women had won the right to vote. The work continued, but the fight wasn't over. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, but many women of color still faced huge obstacles. Black women in the South were blocked by voter suppression laws, intimidation, and violence. Native American women weren't even U.S. citizens until 1924. Asian American women were denied citizenship, and voting rights until the 1940s and 1950s. Latina women often faced language tests and racist barriers at the polls. It wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that many of these injustices were addressed. So yes, 1920 was a turning point, but the struggle for full voting rights continued. Why this story matters. The story of women's suffrage is a story of courage, determination, and the power of people coming together to demand change. It took generations of women and men who refused to give up. So the next time you vote, remember, that right was fought for. It was earned through sacrifice, protest, and relentless hope. Let's never take it for granted. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about which suffragist you admire most. Thanks for watching, and let's keep learning from the past to shape a better future.